Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is a very exciting video. Today I'm going to be looking back to see all of the books that I have read in 2023. So in total, I read 50 books in 2023. Now, I am full-time in school and I do work 2 jobs. In saying that, I do want to put out that disclaimer that it doesn't matter how many books you read in a year, whether you read 1, whether you read 5, 50, 100, 200, that you had fun reading and that you found some books that you really enjoyed. So with that being said, I am going to try to make this short and sweet, to the point. I'm not going to do a full synopsis of each of the books because then we'll be here pretty much all day and nobody has time for that. So I'll just give my brief thoughts, what I kind of rated the book, and we'll go from there. Also, this isn't going to be in order because there are some series that I want to talk about together that I didn't necessarily read one after the other. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so this is actually the first book that I did read this year, and this is One True Loves by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I did enjoy this book. I will say that The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo is still probably my favorite. It was a really good story about how you can have different loves in your lifetime. I did give this one 4 stars. Atlas of the Heart by Brené Brown. Now, this was probably one of the only nonfiction that I read, and one of my goals for next year is to read more nonfiction. But this one is basically about a whole list of different emotions that the human can experience, and how each of them differ, and how sometimes when we explain that we're expressing an emotion, it might not be the correct one that we're trying to explain. I gave this 3 stars. Reminders of Him by Colleen Hoover. I did enjoy this book. This book was a really heartwarming, heartbreaking story about this woman that went to prison and she's trying to seek redemption now that she's come out of prison, and she wants to get her daughter back. This was a really good one by Colleen Hoover. I gave this one a 4 stars. Next, I don't have a physical copy of this because I did borrow this from one of my grandmother's friends, and it is On Mystic Lake by Kristen Hanna. This one was a really good one. There are kind of some trigger warnings, so look that up before you do go into this one. But it's about a woman that goes back to her hometown after her husband says that he wants a divorce, and she reconnects with a friend that she had in high school, and he's going through his own thing and he has a daughter, and it's just a really wholesome book, but it also talks about some really difficult topics. I gave this one a 3 star. It was a little slow, but I did enjoy the story. The first series that I'm going to talk about is the Dirty Air series. So I read this entire series this year. So I started off with the first one, Throttled. This was my favorite out of the series. I gave this a 5 star. The man in this one, oh, he was so good. It's also Brother's Rival, which was also really interesting to read, and I flew through this one. I really needed to study when I read this, but I just couldn't put it down. Second in the series is Collided. I did like this one, but I didn't like it as much as the first one. This one was probably my least favorite in the series, but it was still good. It was like a friends with benefits situation. If I didn't mention this, this is like an F1 racing romance series. I gave this one 3 stars. Wrecked is the 3rd book in the series. This one is probably the heaviest one. There are some trigger warnings to this one. I would say also the second one, there's a couple of trigger warnings as well. This one, I had a hard time with this one. I did enjoy the story, but I didn't like the guy. I understand that a lot of what he's going through and the 3rd act breakup, why he did what he did, but I don't know if I could come back from that. I still gave this one 3 stars, but that's basically why I only gave it 3. Last one in the series is Redeemed. This one takes place a couple years after the other 3, and this is the brother of the girl in the first book, and this one seems to be the most popular one. A lot of people say that this is their favorite. I did enjoy it. I did feel like it was really long and it didn't really live up to the first one. The one thing that I really enjoyed in this one was the first couple actually appeared in this book as well. I gave it a 4-star, so I would say it was my second favorite in the series. Next is The Inheritance Games. I really did not like this one, and this is a very unpopular opinion, but it is a YA mystery. It's the first book in like a trilogy, and it's about this girl. Basically, she inherits this fortune from this man that she has no idea who he is, and then his whole family is having this like conniption that she is inheriting all this money, and that sounds like a really good premise, but I just really couldn't get into it, and I couldn't really connect to the characters. I didn't really care about the story. I know a lot of people love this series, but I think it was also the timing that I read this book. I read this book actually when I had to have emergency surgery, so there's just like some negativity surrounding this book, and it just was one of those books that I just felt like I had to drag myself through. And some people have said that the series does get better, but I think I'm just gonna not continue with the series. I have so many other books that I'm excited to read, and I just don't really think it's worth it. I did give this a 2-star. I feel like this is just a me problem and not like a book problem. I think also some young adult doesn't really do it for me. Next series, I read 2 books in the series, and I still have 1 left to read this year. But I read the first 2 books in the Knockout series by Lucy Score. So the first one is Things We Never Got Over, and I loved this book. I had started this earlier in the year and I put it down. I wasn't really into it. It is a slow start, I will say that, and it is like 500 pages. So it is a slower book, but I fell in love with the little small town and like the found family and everything, and it wasn't just the romance that I was interested in. I was interested in the main character's relationship with her newfound niece that she didn't know even existed. Some of the romance just like had me swooning, like especially at the end. This also was a really funny book. There was a lot of funny moments that I actually laughed out loud to. So I just really enjoyed my time reading this. I know there's a lot of criticisms out there about this book because the 2 main characters, they are kind of immature for the age that they are. They are a little bit older. I didn't care. I did give this one a 5-star. Second book is Things We Hide from the Light. A lot of people did not like this book. I did enjoy this book. I didn't enjoy it as much as I did the first one. This one follows the main character, the male main character in the first book, his brother, and there's a continuation. He is a police officer and he went through something kind of traumatic in the first book. There's like this whole mystery that's kind of going throughout the series, which was another thing that I really enjoyed about it. And this one is between him and his brother's friend. So she kind of helps him work through some of this trauma, and I did enjoy it. I gave it a 4 stars. My mom, she started to read the second one and she didn't get super far. She said it wasn't really gripping her, so take that with what you will. Love on the Brain, Ali Hazelwood. I read The Love Hypothesis in 2022 and I absolutely loved that book. I ate it up. The male main character in that, oh, he just so good, so good. This one, I did enjoy it. It wasn't as good in my opinion, but I still liked it. Ali Hazelwood writes all about women in STEM, and I really enjoy reading those kind of female empowerment kind of novels, but with like the romance added to it. I still enjoyed it. I did give this one a 4 stars. I would say the male main character in this didn't do it for me like the first book, The Love Hypothesis, but it was still an entertaining read. Now, this series holds a special place in my heart. I read it at a time where I really needed an escape and I really needed something to help me get through what I was going through. I read this after I had my emergency surgery and I lost my ovary. And I know I have heard a lot of people don't really like this series, but I really enjoyed it. Like I said, I needed something to escape into and I just couldn't get enough. I had to keep reading. Like I read all 3 of these back to back to back, which is kind of rare for me. And this is the Kingdom of the Wicked trilogy. So the first one is Kingdom of the Wicked. This is basically about this girl that makes a deal with one of the 7 princes of hell. But I really enjoyed this. The tension in this series was, it was so good. And even like the mystery was really interesting to me. First book I gave 4 stars. The second book, I would say that this was my favorite out of the 3. I also gave this 4 stars, and the reason this one was the best to me is I was just really intrigued with the mystery, but the progression of the relationship between 2 of the characters, it was just so good. And like I said, the tension was just so good. But this was the best. And then Kingdom of the Feared. I remember I didn't have this book on me when I finished the second book. I got the first 2 from Book Outlet. I didn't have this one, and I was like, what am I gonna do? So I ended up ordering this on Amazon, and I remember waiting around like literally all day for this book to come to my doorstep, and then I immediately started it. So this one, I didn't like it as much. I felt it was a little bit slow, and the direction of the story was kind of weird, but I still liked it. I gave this one a 3 stars. I'm also going to talk about these 2 books together. I haven't finished the series, but this is the first 2 books. So the first is Magnolia Parks by Jessa Hastings. I did like this, but I didn't love it as much as I thought I would. I do agree that the writing style is beautiful. It did take me a little bit to get into the type of writing that this author has. And this is a very character-driven story, so if you're not in the mood for that, then you probably won't really like it. And it's very toxic. It's like a lot of people describe it as Gossip Girl but in London, but there's so much more to it. Like there's even like a gang embedded into it, but not so much in the first one. This one is told in the point of view of Magnolia and BJ, which I found Magnolia a little bit annoying. But anyways, I gave this a 4 stars. And then I read the second one, which is Daisy Hates. This is basically in the same timeline as Magnolia Parks, the first book, but following 3 other characters. So this one is Christian, Daisy, and Julian. And I think I am a Daisy girl over a Magnolia girl. I'll still have to see, because I've heard that the last 2 books that are out currently are the best. I am excited to read the next 2 books this year, but I also gave this one a 4 stars. This one was also interesting because there's footnotes for Daisy's perspective, which I'd never read in a book before, so that also took some getting used to, but I did enjoy the commentary. Okay, I know I said I was gonna be pretty brief, so we'll be even more brief moving forward. One of my lowest rated books that I read this year, and I probably should have just like put it down and not read the rest of it, but it was The It Girl by Ruth Ware. I did borrow this one from one of my nanny's friends, and I gave this a 2 stars. I think it was just very long. The reason I gave it 2 stars was the twist at the ending was pretty good, but the build up to it just was really boring. So another series that I read, that I only read the first 2, but there's 4 in it, is the Twisted series. So I read Twisted Love, which is the first book. I did really enjoy this. It was a fun time. I do agree with people that the main guy in this book, he's very possessive. He's very alpha, and I was okay with that. Some of the things that he did though, like at the end, I was like, okay, that's a little too far, too obsessive, but it was just a fun time. So I rated this 4 stars. Then I read Twisted Games, and most people say that this is their favorite. This is not mine. I think for me, I really need in a romance for there to be an emotional connection before there's a physical connection or any sort of like emotional connection in the book. This one was basically physical attraction, and I don't know, I just couldn't connect to the characters, and the story wasn't super interesting. I still gave this 3 stars because it wasn't like I had a horrible time reading it, but I just was disappointed because I didn't feel connected. Flowers for Algernon. This was my book club with my 3 friends from high school. This was our first book, and this is a modern day classic. This one was good. I feel like there was a lot of really interesting commentary about experimentation and ethics when it comes to running like research trials and that kind of thing, especially when it has to do with human subjects. I gave this one a 3 stars. Another series that I started, and I've only read the two books, and now I think there's 5 books. So I've read the first 2, is the Never After series. So I read Hooked. Hooked is the first one, and these are basically dark retellings that are very loosely based off of fairy tales. So this one's very loosely based off of Peter Pan, and it's basically the villain stories and how the villain gets the girl. So this one, it's between Hook and Wendy, and Peter Pan is actually, in this retelling, is the father of Wendy. So this was actually really good. This was my first dark romance, and there was some parts of it that were pretty dark. I gave this one 4 stars. And then the second one is Scarred. This one is loosely based off of The Lion King. And I don't know if it was the time that I read this that I just really wasn't vibing with it. I think also too, I couldn't really feel the connection between the love interests. This one was just okay to me. I think I gave it a 3 stars, but most people say that this is their favorite, so I was kind of let down by that. But I would say so